You know, ladies and gentlemen, we talked about the 1979 NHL playoffs being bizarre as 12 of the 17 teams in the league made the postseason. Now, you would think with the next season, with the expansion with four WHA teams coming in, they would keep it at 12 teams. No. The 1980 Stanley Cup playoffs featured 16 teams, for one against 16, two against 15, as we go along. Now, it started on April 8th after the conclusion of the 1980 campaign. The season saw the addition of four squads from the disbanded WHA, Hartford, Winnipeg, Edmonton, and Quebec as the expansion franchise, and thus the playoffs were also expanded from 12 to 16. The expanded playoff format allowed two of these former clubs, the Gretzky-led Edmonton Oilers and the Hartford Whalers, which featured Gordie Howe, to make the postseason, their first season in the NHL. The Atlanta Flames played their final playoff games before moving to Calgary after the season. The playoffs would eventually return to Atlanta in 2007 when the expansion Thrashers made their first postseason appearance. Now, of course, the Thrashers later moved to Winnipeg. Now, the playoffs concluded on May 24th when the New York Islanders defeat the Flyers 5-4 to win the final series 4-2 on Bobby Nystrom's overtime counter at Nassau in Game 6. It was the Islanders' first Stanley Cup win and was the first of four consecutive Stanley Cup victories. And of course, in 77, 78, and 79, as a top three contender, they didn't meet the expectations of their fans or the NHL. Now, with the league expansion from 17 to 21 teams, the playoffs were also expanded from, again, a 12-team tournament to a 16-team tournament. The 16 teams were composed of the four divisional champions, plus the top 10 finishers of the remaining 17 teams. The 16 qualifying squads were then seeded based on regular season points, with divisional rankings ignored. Division leaders no longer received first round byes, which was very controversial because the Sabres had a really good season, winning the Adams division. The teams were seeded 1 through 16, with the top squad playing the 16 team in the first round, and so on. In subsequent rounds, matchups were similarly arranged, with the top remaining seed against the lowest remaining seed, and so on. The prelim round was expanded to be a best of 5 set, up from a best of 3, which one of our followers of the channel said it was done to basically stop the Philadelphia-Vancouver debacle, where they were playing at the Spectrum one night. 2 days later, flew all the way to Vancouver, and Game 3 flew all the way back instead of having 2-2-1. Now, the Flyers were tops overall in the league with 116 points, buoyed by an undefeated streak of 35 games. The Sabres, led by Gilbert Perreault, won the Adams division with 110 points. Montreal won the North with 107, going again undefeated in the last of the season. The Bruins had 105 points. The Islanders had 91. The Minnesota North Stars had 88. Now get this. Chicago had won the division the year before with a shitty point total. Here the points went up, and he ended up being up to 7th seed and winning the Smite. Then you had the Rangers, the Flames, the Blues, the Maple Leafs, the Kings, the Penguins, the Whalers, Vancouver, and Edmonton. Now, the first round series were quite interesting, ladies and gentlemen. Philly took on Edmonton, so it was Bobby Clarke against Wayne Gretzky. Philly did sweep the Oilers, but it was a tough go. Buffalo got past Vancouver 3-1 as number 2 seed. Montreal, with Guy Lafleur injured in Game 3, but a hit by Pat Poutet, outlasted Hartford. Lambert's winner in Game 3. Gordie Howe and Keon couldn't get past. Boston squeaked by Pittsburgh 3-2. The Islanders defeated LA 3-1. Minnesota, the Steve Payne years, they got by past Toronto 3-0. Now, this would have been a very interesting playoff in 1980. If you would have won, it would have been the third straight year that Montreal would have played Toronto in the postseason. Now, Chicago outlasted St. Louis 3-0, and the Rangers won 3-1 against Atlanta. So there was no upsets. Now, here's where it gets freaky. Philly bet the Islanders 4-1. Buffalo swept Chicago 4-0. We figured we were going to go to the Stanley Cup. Montreal lost in 7 games to Minnesota, despite a 2-0 drop in the early part of the series. They went up 3-2. Michel Larocque lost his mind. Then Heron gave up a rough goal to the young ends, and then McAdam scored late. Steve Payne as well was a factor. And the Islanders knocked out Boston 4-1 of equal stead. In the semifinals, a very interesting series. Philadelphia got past Minnesota 4-1, while the Islanders knocked out Buffalo 4-2. Now I want to talk a little bit about the Islanders Buffalo series because Buffalo could have easily won the Stanley Cup that year. They were that strong because they had a mixture of new players and strong veterans. Now the Islanders won the first game at the odd 4-1 and won game 2 2-1 again at the odd. Now at Nassau in game 3 the Islanders won 7-4. But get this, ladies and gentlemen, the Sabres, just like they did against Edmonton, won 7-4 at Nassau in game 4 where the Islanders were looking to wrap up. They won 2-0 at home and lost, unfortunately, 5-2 in the final. Now, what's interesting about this, ladies and gentlemen, Gilbert Perreault, who was, again, the team leader, had a very difficult series. He only scored first in game 3 of the set and then scored twice in game 4, which gave him the comeback. Back at home, John Van Baxmeer scored the winner. Richie Dunn had a big counter, but the Perreault arrow was pretty well not available there. Now this was a team effort by the Islanders. The Bob Orr had a really strong series, scoring numerous great goals. Butchie Goring was playing great as well. Now Bourne had a factor in all the games because he was he scored in every game but game number 5. So Bourne 10 goals by the second round in less than in 10 games, so tremendous. And the big factor, of course, was Billy Smith. Glenn Resch was given the night to get it past, but Billy Smith was a factor. He was very strong against Buffalo there, and Don Edwards, not too bad for Buffalo, even though they relied more on Bob Sauvé at the tail end of the series. So a lot of people were surprised that Buffalo didn't win the series. So, but Gilles had a hat trick in the 7-4 win. That's one of the best games he played in the playoffs. Of course, in the finals, the Islanders knocked off the Flyers 4-3 in overtime in game 1. Flyers won game 2 8-3 at the Spectrum. Then back in New York, Islanders won 6-2 and 6-5. 6-2 and 5-2. Flyers won 6-3 back at home. And of course, the rough game 7 for the Flyers, losing 5-4 in overtime on the Tenelli Nystrom goal. Now, this was the second playoff series and only finals between the two teams. Philadelphia had won the only previous meeting in 7 games in the 75 Stanley Cup semifinals. This was the year where they were behind 3-0 and came back to tie it before Philly won it. Now, Ken Morrow, with the victory, became the first player in history to win an Olympic gold medal in the Stanley Cup the same season. And Game 6 was the last NHL game to air on American network television for nearly 10 years because the NHL package was pretty well gone. But with the expansion to ESPN, and it went on regional feeds and sport channel stuff like that. But it was a very, like I said, a very, very good set from start to finish. So, ladies and gentlemen, playoff formats are very interesting because the NFL at one point would only have maybe half their teams in the postseason because they had a lot of former AFL squads. But the idea of having a best of 3 was very unfair. The best of 5 was a little bit better. Now, I'll give an example of what I mean. 2 games home, 2 games on the road. The Flyers Edmonton series, 2 games went to overtime. They couldn't even win either way. It was very exciting. And 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 7 games went overtime in the first round, which is tremendous. But a very interesting point what the gentleman I made on a comment. He said you had the top 5 or 6 teams, Flyers, Montreal, Islanders, Buffalo, whatever. Then you had the secondary teams, and then you had the filler. But Minnesota North Stars went from secondary teams to Division 1 through that victory over the Maple Leafs. They knocked off 2 Canadian teams back-to-back, which was very rare at the time, where an American team would do that. Obviously, it couldn't be done. It could be done in the original 6, but we're talking the Minnesota North Stars. I think the MVP of the early 1980s, late 70s, early 80s when the Minnesota North Stars, because he gave Boston all he could handle, and he gave the Flyers all he could handle as well. But see, the Flyers, they're a very underrated offense. They would score goals in bunches, like against Minnesota. They scored 7-5, 3, and 7 in their four straight victories. So, again, but goaltending was a factor for the Flyers because with Billy Smith and Glenn Resch, they were a little bit better. So, ladies and gentlemen, that's the story of the 1980 NHL playoffs. Thanks for the support. We are passing 1.4 million hits on the channel, which is tremendous because we're here for you. If you want to continue to support us, please drop in, give us a like, comment, subscribe, or share. And this channel is for you. Please make requests because if we don't provide you what you want, you're not going to come back. And we may be wrong sometimes, we may be right, but you're the most important person on this channel. If you take time to drop in, there's no cost to you. You're given 5-10 minutes per podcast. We really appreciate you. Whether you be from Rick from Sweden, our friends in Minnesota, our friends in Philadelphia, friends in Alberta, our movie fans, our TV fans. You know, the people are giving good condolences to Donald Sutherland this week. You know, this is an historical channel. This is not your typical channel where we're giving you opinions. We base this on fact. We use many, for example, Hockey Draft Central, IMDb, Wikipedia, Canadian Encyclopedia, all the great resources we can use. By the way, one guy criticized me for reading Wikipedia. We can't assume that everybody's listening to the channel is functionally literate. You know, 30% of the population cannot read or write properly. And if you like my voice, I'm providing you with the fact you don't have to read. You can sit back with a cup of coffee, make fun of my French accent, and say, "Oh, maybe I wonder if you did something on Eric Vale or Rick Hampton or, you know, how Billy Smith's first hockey card was the first card that showed the goaltender on the ice." That's a true story, by the way. That famous rookie card he had was one of the first cards that showed the goalie on the ice. How's that for trivia? You might do a story on that later on. So if you like what you're doing here, ladies and gentlemen, give us a like, comment, subscribe, or share. And by the way, this is the anniversary of the NHL sticker set in Canada. I think we're in our 50th anniversary. So if you'd collected them, happy birthday. Have a good one. Bye.